The night that broke me did not begin with thunder or warning. It began with candlelight. Dozens of flames flickered against crystal glassware in a private dining room at Fleming's Steakhouse, each one reflected in polished silver and porcelain plates. It was a room meant for celebration, meant to honor milestones, meant to cradle laughter and warmth. I thought it would cradle us too. I had spent weeks preparing every detail of my mother Evelyn's 65th birthday. The flower arrangements were precise white roses mixed with pale hydrangeas, her long declared favorites. The bakery had crafted a towering cake with buttercream so smooth it gleamed under the chandelier. Even the music's soft piano drifting from hidden speakers had been chosen with her tastes in mind. For weeks I told myself this time will be different. I had restored my grandmother's sapphire bracelet, a family heirloom set in white gold, to catch the light. The restoration had cost me more than I'd admit to anyone, but to me it was more than a gift. It was an offering, a plea for recognition. I thought it would be the key to unlocking something in her, if not love, then perhaps gratitude. Guests began to arrive at 7 sharp, my mother's friends gliding into the room in pearls and pressed suits. They greeted me warmly. "Your mother is so lucky to have you," Eleanor whispered, her hand squeezing mine with genuine warmth. I smiled, but my stomach nodded. Luck was not a word I had ever associated with my mother's feelings toward me. At 7:15, the room hushed as Evelyn entered. She was dressed in the black dress I had bought her the Christmas before her silver hair curled into perfection. She looked regal, like a woman who commanded attention without needing to ask for it. I moved to embrace her, but she offered me only her cheek, rigid as stone. "The valet took forever," she murmured, eyes flicking across the room. "And this lighting, it's too dim. Who wants to squint through dinner?" "I can ask them to brighten it," I offered quickly. "Never mind," she waved me off. "It's fine." But I saw her mouth curl faintly in disapproval. I had grown up watching those tiny gestures, each one a verdict. Dinner unfolded with practiced rhythm. Evelyn charmed her friends with sharp anecdotes and biting humor, her glass of Cabernet never far from hand. I became invisible, little more than a server, relaying her complaints to the waitstaff: steak, overcooked wine, poured too slow flowers, irritating her sinuses. My friends once joked I should list professional appeaser on my resume. They didn't know how close to truth it was. Still, I clung to the hope that the gift might change something. When the main course ended, I rose with trembling hands. "Mom," I said, my voice too thin against the room's hum, "I wanted to give you something special tonight." From the velvet box, I revealed the bracelet. Blue sapphires gleamed under the chandelier stones, catching light like ocean waves at dawn. "It belonged to Grandma. I had it restored for you." A hush fell over the table. I had pictured her eyes softening, maybe even brimming with the tears she never allowed herself. Instead, she snapped the box shut with a sound that echoed louder than silverware against porcelain. "She should have left it to me in the first place," Evelyn said, flat and cold. "She always did favor you inappropriately." The silence that followed was suffocating. My cheeks flamed, and I forced a smile as I returned to my chair, the box abandoned on the linen. The cake arrived next, candles glowing, guests singing. My mother smiled for the photographer, her lips stretching into a perfect performance. Then she rose, lifting her glass. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice smooth, commanding. "It is good to be surrounded by true friends on my birthday." She turned her gaze toward me, the smile vanishing. "If I were to wish for a gift this year," she continued, "it would be for certain people to leave my life entirely. No more pretense, no more obligation, just freedom from relationships that were never meant to be." Time slowed. My body turned to ice, my ears roared with the blood pounding through them. Around me, her friends shifted, uncomfortable eyes darting between me and her. The meaning was unmistakable. She clinked her glass to the air. "To another year." I sat frozen, pulse hammering, watching her sip wine as though she hadn't just cut me open before an audience. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I laughed when required, thanked guests on autopilot, watched the photographer quietly pack his equipment and slip away. Inside, I was hollow, echoing with her words. Later, as I drove her home in silence, streetlights passing like judgment across the windshield, I asked, barely audible, "Did you mean it?" She glanced at me, then back to the road. "Don't be so sensitive, Peggy. I was making a general statement." It didn't feel general. It felt very specific. She sighed as though exhausted by my existence. "If you choose to take everything personally, that's your problem. But yes, our relationship has always been a burden. I did my duty raising you. I am not obligated to pretend otherwise now. I grip the steering wheel, my knuckles bone white. I pay your bills. I keep your house standing. I take you to every doctor's appointment. And you never let me forget it, she snapped, voice sharp as glass. You think your support buys you the right to be in my life. That's your father in you, always keeping score. She slammed the car door when we arrived, walking into the dark without looking back. I stayed in the driveway for 20 minutes, tears streaming down my face, shoulders shaking so hard I could barely breathe. Her words echoed like a curse burden. Not obligated. Leave my life entirely. And as dawn broke hours later, a single truth crystallized in me, sharper than any jewel in that bracelet. Nothing I ever did, nothing I ever gave would ever be enough. That was the night I began to vanish. If the birthday dinner was the breaking point, then my childhood was the long, careful construction of the cage I lived in. Every bar of that cage was welded by my mother's voice, sharp as a chisel, steady as a drumbeat. Stand up straight, Peggy. No one respects a girl who slouches. Smile, but not like that, you look ridiculous. Your grades are good, but Jennifer's daughter got into Harvard. Don't get cocky. It was a symphony of correction, and I was its only audience. When I was 5, I brought her a drawing from preschool stick figures with lopsided smiles. A rainbow stretched across the page. Other mothers taped drawings like that to refrigerators. Evelyn's eyes scanned it, and she pursed her lips. The arms are uneven. And why would you color the sky purple? Don't you know the sky is blue? She dropped it into the trash without another word. That was the first time I realized my efforts were disposable. Yet in the same house, there was light. My father, Thomas Hamilton, was warmth embodied. When I showed him my crooked art, he didn't see flaws, he saw my imagination. Look at that, he'd say, kneeling so his eyes were level with mine. You've painted a sunset. Purple skies happen when the sun is feeling dramatic. He'd wink, and suddenly my mistake was a masterpiece. He was the buffer, the shield against her cutting remarks. His presence filled the spaces she left hollow. But when I was 12, everything changed. It was a Sunday afternoon in spring, the kind of day when lilacs burst open and the air smells sweet enough to bottle. Dad was in the backyard, pruning the rose bushes he adored. I was inside at the kitchen table, bent over my math homework, when I realized the house had gone too quiet. When I found him, he was lying on the grass, pruning shears still in his hand. His chest did not rise. His face was slack eyes, half open, as if mid-thought. My scream tore through the neighborhood, drawing Mrs. Carter from next door. She dropped to her knees, trying CPR, shouting for me to call 911. I remember fumbling with the phone, sobbing so hard I could barely read the numbers. The ambulance came, lights washing our house in red and blue, but it was too late. At the hospital, I sat trembling in a vinyl chair when Evelyn swept in fresh from her weekly bridge club. She looked at me, not with concern, but accusation. Why weren't you watching him more carefully, she demanded. You knew his heart was weak. Her words landed like a stone in my chest. I was 12 years old and somehow in her mind responsible for his death. That guilt would not leave me. It rooted itself inside me, fed by every criticism that followed. From that day, my life became a relentless audition for approval. I joined every club in school debate, newspaper, science fair, theater crew. I was the first to raise my hand in class, the last to leave the library. I stayed up until midnight perfecting essays, rehearsing speeches, memorizing lines of Shakespeare until my throat was raw. My reward? Comparisons. Lisa's daughter spoke with such poise at her recital. Jennifer's girl already has Ivy League recruiters watching her. I earned a 4.0 GPA, became captain of the debate team, edited the school paper. But when I brought home awards, Evelyn's lips curled as if I'd tracked mud on her clean floor. Do you think trophies make you special? She asked once, fingering the medal I'd hung in my bedroom. Anyone can memorize words. The cruelest part was that I believed her. I believed I was ordinary, flawed, undeserving, unless I worked harder. In my quiet moments, though, I ached for the softness my father had given me. I'd dig through old drawers to find the birthday card he wrote the year before he died. To my bright girl, keep shining. His words, scrawled in imperfect penmanship, were the only balm I had. But Evelyn had her own narrative, one where she was the martyr holding everything together and I was the burden. She told me once at 14, your father spoiled you. He made you think you were better than you are. I'm the only one keeping you grounded. Even then, some part of me whispered that wasn't true, that maybe she clipped my wings not to protect me, but because she feared how high I might fly without her. High school blurred into a cycle of striving and rejection. I never stopped chasing, never stopped hoping that the next A, the next title, the next accolade would finally make her proud. But her praise was always withheld, rationed, like water in a desert I never reached. Still, I clung to the fantasy that she might change, that if I became extraordinary enough, she'd have no choice but to love me. I didn't understand yet that approval for her was never the same as love. At 17, when I received the acceptance letter from Northwestern with a full scholarship, my heart leapt. I ran to her, waving the envelope like a flag of triumph. She scanned it, her expression unreadable. Then she sighed. "College is harder than you think. You'll probably drop out by Christmas." Her words stung, but something in me hardened. I told myself I'll prove her wrong, and I did. But proving her wrong never meant she admitted I was right. Years later, sitting in that candlelit room as she toasted to a life without me, I realized her script had been the same all along. From the purple skies of my drawings to the sapphire bracelet I restored, she had always found a way to turn beauty into failure. And yet knowing that didn't stop the child inside me from wanting her smile. That night in Fleming's, as I sat frozen with my untouched cake, I saw 12-year-old Peggy again, the girl standing over her father's body, hearing her mother say, "Why weren't you watching him?" And I understood my mother had written me into her story as both the failure and the guilty party. No matter what I did, she would never let me be anything else. The cage had been welded long before I ever realized it, but soon I would find the strength to break it. By the time I reached my 20s, I had trained myself to excel in every measurable way, grades, internships, accolades. But the one thing I couldn't master was love. Not because I lacked opportunity, men noticed me. They admired my intelligence, my ambition, even my quiet determination. But what they didn't realize was that I carried an invisible shadow to every date, every dinner, every moment of affection. That shadow was my mother. I met Michael in my senior year of college. He was studying medicine, steady kind, the sort of man who laughed at his own bad jokes and carried extra granola bars in his backpack for anyone who forgot lunch. He made me feel seen not as the daughter of Evelyn Hamilton, but as Peggy. Just Peggy. When I brought him home for dinner, I felt a flicker of reckless hope. Maybe I thought if my mother saw how good he was, she would soften. Maybe she'd even be happy for me. The evening began innocently enough. Roast chicken candlelight. Her table set with china she reserved for special occasions. Michael complimented the meal, tried to draw her into conversation. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Then dessert arrived. My mother leaned back, her glass of wine tilting in her hand, and smiled at him with a precision that made my stomach knot. "Michael, I'm surprised you've taken an interest in Peggy," she said lightly, as though commenting on the weather. She was always so awkward with boys, never quite knew how to carry herself. The fork slipped from my fingers, clattering against porcelain. Michael chuckled nervously, unsure if it was a joke. I tried to laugh too, but my chest burned with humiliation. Later that week, he grew distant. When he finally ended things, he confessed that my mother had called him privately. She had told him about my emotional instability, about how I still had a lot of unresolved issues, and wasn't ready for a serious relationship. I remember standing in my apartment afterward, phone still warm in my hand, rage coursing through me. She had sabotaged me. Again. It wasn't the last time. At 25, there was Ryan, an architect with warm, hazel eyes, who sketched buildings in the margins of napkins during our dates. He made me laugh in a way that loosened something in me, like I could breathe without measuring each inhale. I kept him from my mother for months, guarding him like a secret. But eventually the truth leaked. Ryan insisted on meeting her. It was the natural next step. Against my better judgment, I agreed. She played gracious hostess that night, serving wine, asking polite questions about his projects. I almost let myself believe she was trying. But later, Ryan confesses that she had pulled him aside in the kitchen. She warned him that I was clingy, overly dependent, that I demanded constant reassurance. "Your mother said she's only telling me because she cares about me." Ryan admitted guilt in his eyes. "She doesn't want me to end up hurt." Within weeks, he drifted away, another casualty of Evelyn's campaign. By 28, I met James, a colleague in finance, sharp, ambitious, with a crooked smile that made board meetings almost bearable. He was different, more resilient. When I told him what my mother had done in the past, he promised I won't let her interfere. I know what I want. But Evelyn was relentless. She didn't strike openly this time. Instead, she sowed seeds of doubt with quiet precision. Subtle comments slipped like poison into conversation. James, do you really think Peggy will make time for family? She's married to her career, or Peggy always pushes people away. She's so much like her father, charming but unreliable. Each remark was wrapped in feigned concern, never outright accusations, always plausible as a slip of the tongue. And slowly, inevitably, the distance grew. Arguments sprouted where there had been none. Questions of commitment, of priorities, of trust. Eventually, James too was gone. Each breakup left me hollowed raw with humiliation. I would sit across from my mother at Sunday dinners, staring at her composed face, wondering if she took pride in her victories, if she saw me unraveling and thought better she learned now than later. When I confronted her once, her response was chillingly calm. "I'm just looking out for you, Peggy. You have terrible judgment in men. Someone has to protect you from yourself." Her words twisted inside me until I began to doubt myself. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was broken. Maybe I didn't deserve love. Still, some part of me kept reaching. The child who once clung to purple skies and uneven stick figures still lived in me, desperate for validation. I wanted her approval so badly that I accepted even her sabotage as warped protection. But late at night, lying awake in my Back Bay condo, I replayed her words, her smirks, her interference, and something darker grew alongside my longing. Resentment. Because if I was honest, it wasn't love she was protecting me from. It was independence. She didn't want me to build a life separate from hers, one where she wasn't the sun and I wasn't the orbiting planet. If I had a husband, if I had children, my loyalty might be divided. And Evelyn Hamilton never tolerated division. She wanted me tethered to her bound by obligation and guilt. And she succeeded. For years, she succeeded. But as I would later learn, even the strongest chains can rust when pulled taut enough. It would take one more betrayal, one public, unforgettable humiliation for me to finally see that the love I longed for would never come, that no man could stay, not until I severed the first cruel bond that tied me to my mother. And by then I would no longer be begging for her approval. I would be planning my escape. By the time I turned 30, I had built the kind of life that looked enviable from the outside. My resume glittered. I was a senior financial advisor at a top Boston firm managing portfolios for clients, whose names appeared in magazines. My condo overlooked the tree-lined streets of Back Bay, its hardwood floors gleaming, its walls adorned with art I had chosen carefully, or so I told myself. But in truth, almost everything in that space had been curated, not for me, but for her. The sleek dining set bought to impress my mother when she visited, the designer sofa chosen because she once sneered at my cheap taste in furniture. Even the oil paintings on the wall works, I never particularly liked, hung there because she once commented that my home looked bare. My condo was not a sanctuary. It was a showroom for her approval. And still approval never came. Every Sunday, I drove across town to her aging colonial house in Brooklyn, the house she had refused to downsize from even after Dad died. I would let myself in to find her already seated in the living room catalog strewn across her lap, lips pursed in discontent. Finally, she'd sigh as if I were late. Though I was always on time. The neighbors are unbearable. Their dog barked all night. And look at this, my hydrangeas are withering. Didn't you say you'd call someone about the soil? I'd nod, already pulling out my phone to schedule a gardener, a plumber, a contractor, whatever, would quiet the endless complaints. She never said thank you. Instead, she treated my support as if it were a given, as if it were my duty. And in some twisted way, I agreed. After Dad's sudden death, she had never gone back to work. She lived off his life insurance, then his pension. When those ran dry, it was my income that kept her afloat. I paid her property taxes, her utilities, her medical bills. I funded her indulgences, the black dresses, the hair appointments at salons that charged more per cut than my monthly grocery bill. I even covered her credit card minimums when she overspent. My friends envied my career, my independence. They didn't see that much of my paycheck went not toward building my own future, but toward preserving hers. "You're such a good daughter," they'd say. "Your mother is lucky." Lucky, that word again. I didn't feel lucky. I felt trapped. Like a performer on stage, forced to play the same role every week, dutiful child provider, fixer of problems she invented or magnified. I remember once, after a particularly grueling week at work, I confided in my therapist. Maybe if I do something big, something unforgettable, she'll finally see me. She tilted her head, thoughtful. "Peggy, are you seeking her gratitude or her love?" The question stunned me into silence. I had never considered the difference. All I knew was that every act of sacrifice felt like throwing coins into a bottomless well, waiting for an echo that never came. And yet I couldn't stop. Part of it was habit, part of it was fear, but mostly it was hope. Hope that she might change. Hope that if I found the right gesture, the right offering, I could rewrite decades of rejection. That hope reached its sharpest point in the months leading up to her 65th birthday. I decided it couldn't just be another dinner or another check slipped across the table. It had to be spectacular, something undeniable, something that would silence her comparisons to Jennifer's daughter, Lisa's daughter, every daughter who wasn't me. I reserved a private dining room at Fleming's Steakhouse, her longtime favorite. I hired a professional photographer, ordered a cake from the bakery she once mentioned in passing, arranged floral centerpieces of roses and hydrangeas. And the bracelet, oh, the bracelet! It had belonged to my grandmother, who left it to me, not her only child. For years, Evelyn had resented that decision, dropping sly comments whenever the bracelet was mentioned. It should have been mine. She always favored you. I thought restoring it and giving it to her would be the ultimate peace offering, a way of saying, you were right, it should be yours. Take it now with my blessing. I convinced myself this gesture would bridge the distance between us. That night at Fleming's, I told my therapist, she'll see how much I care. This time she'll understand. My therapist frowned, hesitated, but said nothing. I mistook her silence for quiet agreement. In truth, it was concern. Because deep down, I already knew the truth. Hope is a stubborn thing. It clings to you even as the rope burns your hands. As the date drew closer, I doubled down on preparations. I arrived at Fleming's an hour early, inspecting the linens, straightening place cards, adjusting the lighting to a glow that flattered everyone. The manager smiled at me. Your mother must be very special. She is, I replied automatically, though inside the words curdled. At 7, sharp guests arrived, praising the arrangements, marveling at the effort. Your mother is so lucky, Eleanor said again, her kind eyes sparkling. I smiled, but my heart pounded. Lucky. Always lucky. When Evelyn finally walked in regal in the black dress I had bought her, she barely glanced at me. She complained about the valet, the lighting the flowers, and I swallowed every protest, every ache, believing the gift would change it all. For the first hour, I floated through the evening in a haze of forced laughter, refilling her glass, smoothing every wrinkle. My body was present, but my mind was already at the moment I would place the bracelet in her hands. Because surely, if anything could break the pattern, it would be this. I didn't know yet that the bracelet would not be the key to her affection. It would be the final lock on a door I had been trying to pry open for 35 years. The night of my mother's 65th birthday should have been a triumph. I had planned every detail like a general preparing for war because that's what it was, a battle for recognition. The private dining room at Fleming's glowed under chandeliers, the table dressed in white linen and polished silver. The air smelled faintly of seared steak and roses, a scent I hoped would soothe her. I kept telling myself, this is the night she will finally see me. Her friends filled the room with chatter and laughter, glasses clinking as waiters poured Cabernet. They congratulated me, their voices warm. Peggy, this is spectacular. Your mother is blessed. Their words skimmed off me like stones on water. I had heard it all before, how lucky she was. None of them knew the truth. Then she arrived. Evelyn swept into the room at precisely 7:15, as if the universe bent to her timing. The black dress I'd bought her shimmered under the lights. Her silver hair was styled with surgical precision, not a strand out of place. I moved to hug her, but she turned her cheek rigid. The valet took forever, she murmured. And this room is too dark. How will anyone see their food? I can ask them to adjust the lighting I offered. Never mind, it's fine, her tone said otherwise. I felt my stomach tighten, but I forced a smile. Tonight wasn't about me. Tonight was about winning. Throughout dinner, she held court at the center of the table, her laugh sharp, her gestures commanding. To her friends, she was charming. To me, she was indifferent, acknowledging me, only to complain. Tell the waiter my steak is overcooked, she said, though it was perfectly medium rare. And these hydrangeas, why would you pick flowers that make me sneeze? I had chosen them because every spring of my childhood she planted hydrangeas by our porch humming as she tucked them into soil. They had been her favorite, or so I thought. Now, watching her wrinkle her nose, I wondered if I had imagined that memory, or if she simply enjoyed erasing what mattered to me. Still, I clung to hope. My hands itched for the velvet box in my purse. When dessert plates were cleared, I rose. My knees trembled, but my voice stayed steady. Mom, I wanted to give you something special. All eyes turned to me. The box felt heavy as I placed it in her hands. This was Grandma's bracelet. I had it restored, the sapphires reset, the clasp replaced with white gold. The room hushed. Evelyn opened the box. The sapphires caught the chandelier's glow, sparkling like captured stars. It was beautiful, no one could deny it. For one fragile second, I imagined her face softening, eyes glistening. I imagined her saying, "Thank you, Peggy. You've made me feel loved." Instead, she snapped the box shut. The sound was louder than shattering glass. "She should have left it to me in the first place," Evelyn said, her voice flat. "She always did favor you inappropriately." A ripple of discomfort swept the table. Guests shifted in their seats, eyes darting between us. My cheeks burned. My throat closed. Eleanor, her oldest friend, reached for her arm. "Evelyn, it's a beautiful gift." But my mother placed the box on the table untouched, as if it were a trinket from a stranger. I sat down, forcing my lips into a brittle smile. Inside, something splintered. Moments later, the cake arrived. Candles glowing. Guests sang happy birthday. Evelyn smiled for the photographer, perfect as always. Then she lifted her glass. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "It is nice to be surrounded by true friends on my birthday." She glanced at me, and her tone sharpened. As I get older, I find myself valuing authenticity more and more. If I could wish for any gift tonight, it would be for certain people to leave my life entirely. No more pretense, no more obligation. Just freedom from relationships that were never meant to be. The room froze. A fork clinked against a plate. Someone coughed nervously. Her gaze pinned me like a butterfly on glass. To another year, she finished sipping her wine. Her friends forced smiles, raising their glasses, though their eyes flicked toward me with pity. My pulse thundered. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. I smiled when required, thanked guests, automatically, even as humiliation burned through me. The photographer quietly packed his camera, sensing the tension. My mother carried on as though nothing had happened. Later in the car, silence pressed against us. Streetlights washed her face in pale yellow. I finally asked, voice breaking, "Did you mean it?" She looked at me cool and detached. "Don't be so sensitive, Peggy. It was a general statement." It didn't feel general. It felt specific. Her sigh was sharp as glass. "If you choose to take everything personally, that's your problem. But yes, our relationship has always been a burden. I did my duty raising you. I don't have to pretend we have some special bond now." Tears burned my eyes, but anger flared too. "I pay your bills. I keep your house. I take you to every doctor's appointment. And you never let me forget it," she snapped. "You think money buys you the right to be in my life? That's your father in you, always keeping score." She slammed the car door and walked into her house without looking back. The bracelet box tucked under her arm, like a prize she hadn't wanted but claimed anyway. I sat in the driveway for nearly 20 minutes, sobbing until my chest ached. Her words looped in my head, burden. Leave my life, not obligated. That night, lying awake in my condo, I understood something. I had spent 35 years refusing to face nothing would ever be enough. No gift, no sacrifice, no achievement could make her love me. And once I knew that I also knew this, I couldn't keep living like this. If she wanted me gone, I would give her exactly what she asked for. Not in anger, but in finality. That was the night I began planning my disappearance. I did not sleep after the birthday dinner. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling. The bracelet's blue sapphires burned into my mind like cold flames. Her words replayed over and over, "Our relationship has always been a burden," until they stopped sounding like a sentence and started sounding like a verdict. At dawn, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen. Outside Boston was just waking sky, streaked with gray-pink light. Inside my condo felt like a stage set after the play had ended, silent, empty false. I began making lists. At first, they were simple bills, appointments, accounts. But the more I wrote, the more the list became a blueprint, a map to freedom. I didn't think of it as revenge. It felt like triage. I was bleeding out. This was how I stopped it. Step 1. Call my office. I had accumulated months of unused vacation time, always too busy caring for my mother to take it. I left a message for my boss, emergency personal leave. Effective immediately. My voice sounded calm, almost detached. Step 2. Call James Wilson, a realtor. I had once helped with an investment property. "I need to sell my condo quickly and discreetly," I told him. "No public listings, no open houses. Find a private buyer willing to pay cash, even if it's slightly below market." He paused. "Are you in trouble, Peggy?" "No," I said. "I'm just making necessary changes." The next call was harder. Gregory Peters, my financial advisor, had managed both my personal and shared accounts with my mother for years. I scheduled an appointment for noon. When I arrived, I handed him a folder so thick it bowed in the middle. I need to untangle my finances from my mother's, I said. Every account, every automatic payment, every financial connection. He leafed through the documents, his brow furrowing. This is extensive. You're paying her property taxes, utilities, credit cards, car insurance, medical copays. Yes, I said, and I want it all stopped immediately. May I ask why this is quite sudden? It's time for both of us to live independently, I said simply. We spent 3 hours restructuring my financial life. I froze the joint checking account where I deposited money for her expenses. I canceled automatic payments to her creditors. I removed myself as an authorized user on her credit cards and removed her as beneficiary on my life insurance and retirement accounts. What about the mortgage on her house? Gregory asked gently. You've been making those payments for 5 years. Stop those too, I said. The house is in her name. The responsibility is hers. He watched me for a moment as if weighing whether to speak. Then he nodded, tapping on his keyboard. Done. From his office, I went straight to the post office to forward my mail to a new P.O. box. I called every service provider we shared home security, lawn care, pest control, and removed my name and payment information. Each call felt like cutting a thread from a web that had trapped me for decades. Back at my condo, I began to pack. Clothes, important documents, irreplaceable photos, a few sentimental items from my father, a leather watch, a postcard he'd written me on a business trip, the purple crayon drawing he once called a masterpiece. Everything else I left. The artwork she had shamed me into buying. The formal dining set I never used. The designer clothes that never felt comfortable. They could stay with the condo or be donated. I didn't care. As I filled the final suitcase, I realized how little of my life was actually mine. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a blank sheet of paper and began drafting the letter. 7 times I crumpled it, started over. 7 times my hands shook. On the 8th try, the words came. Mom, you said the best gift would be for me to leave your life. I am giving you that gift. By the time you read this, I will be gone. The financial support I've provided over the years has ended. The house bills and all expenses are now solely your responsibility. This is not done out of anger, but acceptance. You are right that our relationship has been based on obligation rather than love. I release us both from that obligation. Do not try to find me. I do not wish to be found. I signed it, folded it, slid it into an envelope. At midnight, I drove to her house. The streets were empty windows, dark. I parked across the street, the engine idling, staring at the house, where so much of my life had been spent, where my father had died, where my mother had turned my childhood into an apprenticeship in self-erasure. The porch light burned yellow. I slipped the letter under the door, my hands trembling. For a moment, I stood there half expecting her to open the door to catch me to hurl one last cutting remark, but the house remained still. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I checked into a hotel under a different name, paying cash. The room was generic brown carpet, beige walls, a single painting of a sailboat, but to me, it felt like a sanctuary. I sat on the bed staring at my packed bags. The silence pressed in heavy and unfamiliar. Then I gasped a sound torn from somewhere deep. The weight lifting from my shoulders was so sudden, so immense, it was almost painful. For the first time in my life, I was not responsible for her happiness, comfort, or financial security. For the first time, my money, my decisions belonged entirely to me. Freedom didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like a deep, aching exhale I hadn't realized I'd been holding for 35 years. I slept that night for the first time without setting an alarm to check on her. In the morning, sunlight spilled through the thin curtains. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding with equal parts terror and relief. This was it. No more rehearsing, no more hoping. I had vanished. The first week after I vanished felt like living inside a dream, unmoored, unreal. My body still followed old rhythms. At 9:00 a.m., my hand twitched toward the phone to remind my mother of her medication. On Sunday afternoon, I caught myself reaching for my car keys, ready to drive to her house as though nothing had changed. Each time a wave of realization crashed over me. I don't have to anymore. But freedom is never simple. With relief came guilt, jagged and unrelenting. I would sit in the sterile hotel room staring at the ceiling fan, hearing her voice in my head. You're selfish. You're ungrateful. You're abandoning me. Still, I stayed silent. It didn't take long for the storm to break. On the third day, I checked my old email one last time before closing the account for good. There were already messages from her. Peggy, the lawn service says you canceled their contract. Call me immediately. The electric company claims the automatic payment was stopped. Fix this today. My prescriptions need refilling. Where are you? Not a single mention of the letter I had slid under her door. Not a single acknowledgement of my choice. To her, it was unthinkable that I could simply leave. By day 10, the tone shifted. Eleanor. My mother's oldest friend called my therapist's office frantic. Evelyn came to Peggy's work today, she reported. She was demanding to know where her daughter was. Security had to escort her out when she started shouting. I pictured it vividly, her voice rising, her posture rigid, insisting she had a right to my whereabouts. The thought made my stomach twist with both pity and dread. Soon after, my former assistant, Megan, emailed me at the secret address I'd given, only her and my therapist. Your mother is calling the office nonstop. She's furious. Everyone is uncomfortable. Is everything okay? I typed a simple thank you, but no explanation. My silence was my shield. By the end of the second week, the crisis deepened. Eleanor called my therapist again. Evelyn discovered the mortgage hasn't been paid. She's never written a check in years. Peggy always handled it. She doesn't even know how. I imagined my mother standing at the bank counter, voice clipped, demanding answers. For the first time, she would have heard, "That account is frozen. You'll need to pay with your own funds." But she had none. 3 weeks and her frustration spilled onto social media. Though I had deleted my account's friends forwarded me screenshots. My daughter has abandoned me without warning, she wrote. After all I sacrificed, she left her elderly mother without support or care. Please help me find her. The comments flooded with sympathy. You poor thing. Children these days are so cruel. How could she? A few voices spoke truth. Are you sure, Evelyn? One wrote. Peggy always seemed so devoted, but they were drowned out quickly. I felt a peculiar mix of emotions as I read those posts. Anger, yes, at the lies, but also something I hadn't expected: clarity. For years, I had wondered if maybe I was imagining her cruelty, if maybe I was too sensitive. But now the mask was off. She wasn't lamenting the loss of me. She was lamenting the loss of what I provided. By the end of the fourth week, her life began to unravel in earnest. Eleanor's messages grew heavier. She maxed out her credit cards, she reported. Over $40,000 in debt. Without your payments, she can't even keep up with minimums. The bank has sent warning letters. The news should have filled me with triumph, or at least vindication. Instead, I felt only hollow. I hadn't wanted her to suffer, I had wanted her to see. To finally understand. But Evelyn had never been one to face consequences quietly. At 5 weeks, she drove to my condo only to find strangers moving in. James, my realtor, had already closed the deal. She stood on the sidewalk demanding to know where I was. The new owner shrugged, baffled. She left in a fury, slamming her car door hard enough that neighbors turned to stare. By the 6th week, her health cracked. Eleanor found her collapse in the kitchen, hyperventilating. At the hospital, doctors prescribed medication for anxiety and high blood pressure. For the first time, she asked for me not with venom, but with fear. Eleanor relayed her words to my therapist. She kept saying, "Where is Peggy? Why won't she come? It was the first time I saw her worried for you, not just what you do for her." That night, in my rented apartment, 2 states away, I wept. I wept not because I wanted to return, but because the child in me still longed for her to mean it. When she left her first voicemail that wasn't angry or demanding, I played it again and again. Her voice was smaller, almost brittle. "Peggy, I don't understand why you've done this. I need you to come home. I miss you." The words stumbled out of her mouth as though foreign, like a language she never learned. I didn't believe them entirely, but I couldn't forget them either. Meanwhile, my therapist kept urging me to hold my boundary. "You are not responsible for her crisis," she reminded me. "You warned her in the letter. You gave her clarity. This is her reckoning, not yours." But guilt has a way of disguising itself as compassion. Each time Eleanor updated me about missed mortgage payments, about collections, calls about Evelyn's tears, I felt that rope of obligation tug at me again. Still, I resisted, because deep down I knew if I went back now, I'd undo everything. I would be caught in the same loop: her dependence, my resentment, her criticism, my guilt. And maybe, just maybe, the only way for her to change was to feel the absence she had demanded. I hadn't just disappeared from her life, I had left a void, and the void was beginning to consume her. 2 months into my disappearance, the ripples had become waves crashing over my mother's carefully constructed life. For decades, she had lived inside a fortress built from my labor bills, paid repairs, handled luxuries, funded. Without me, that fortress began to crumble brick by brick. Eleanor became my unwilling messenger, her updates arriving through my therapist like letters smuggled across enemy lines. Evelyn is drowning, she told Dr. Winters. Her credit cards are maxed. The bank sent foreclosure warnings. She doesn't even know how to write a check anymore. I imagined my mother, the woman who had once scoffed at my every achievement, now staring helplessly at past due notices piling on her polished mahogany desk. It should have felt like justice. Instead, it felt like grief for the years I had wasted trying to fill a bottomless cup. At last, Evelyn was facing reality, and reality terrified her. The turning point came when Eleanor told me about the letter. She wrote to you, Peggy, Eleanor said gently. Not an email, not a post, an actual letter. Shaky handwriting. Pages wrinkled like she crumpled them again and again before smoothing them out. I hesitated before agreeing to read it. When I finally did, my hands trembled. Peggy, I have spent these months angry at you for abandoning me. But yesterday I found an old photo album in the attic. Pictures of you as a child, your first school play, your smile with missing teeth, your eyes searching mine for approval I never gave. I realized something I never let myself admit you were hurting, and I made it worse. After your father died, I blamed you because I couldn't bear to blame myself. I was jealous of the love he gave you, jealous of how freely he gave it. I resented you for being young, for having opportunities I never had. None of this excuses me, but it is the truth. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to return. I only want you to know I see it now. I see you, and I am sorry. It was unlike anything I had ever received from her. No demands, no accusations, just words stripped bare, raw and foreign in their humility. I cried as I read it, though, not with relief. The tears came from confusion. For years I had begged for recognition, and now in my absence she offered it. Why now? Why only when my silence forced her to confront herself? Dr. Winters watched me fold the letter carefully, as though it might shatter. How does it feel hearing this from her? Like touching something I don't trust, I whispered. Like if I hold it too tightly, it will vanish. But the letter wasn't the end. It was the beginning of her unraveling. Eleanor updated me again weeks later. She finally admitted to me that she drove you away, she said. She showed me the letter you left. It's the first time I've ever heard her take responsibility for anything. Responsibility. The word echoed in my mind. For 35 years, she had cast blame outward on me, on neighbors, on circumstance. And now, in the ruins of her finances and friendships, she was turning inward. Her decline became public. Without money to maintain appearances, she was forced to sell her house, the Grand Colonial she had clung to as proof of her superiority. Real estate agents walked through its empty rooms, noting peeling paint, broken appliances, a mortgage past due. She had no choice but to list it. When Eleanor told me Evelyn was moving into a senior apartment, something inside me shifted. My mother, who once sneered at those places as cages for the weak, was now walking willingly into one. She's different, Eleanor insisted. Not completely, of course, but she's quieter, humbled. I think losing the house broke something in her. I wasn't sure whether to believe it. I knew how well my mother could perform regret when it suited her. But then Eleanor added she joined a support group for parents estranged from their children. That stunned me. My mother, who had always claimed victimhood without introspection, sitting in a circle of parents confessing their failures, I struggled to imagine it. And yet a week later, I received proof. Another letter arrived forwarded through my therapist. Peggy, the house is gone. I've paid the debts and moved into an apartment I can afford. It is small, but it is mine. I'm learning things I should have learned decades ago, how to pay bills, how to cook simple meals. Eleanor says I am becoming human. I think she's right. I don't ask you to come back. I only ask you to believe me when I say I am trying. I am trying to be someone different. Not for you, not even for me, but because I finally understand how empty my life became when it was built on control and bitterness. Reading those words, I felt something break open. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but space. Space to imagine a future not chained to her cruelty, but not defined solely by my escape either. In therapy, I admitted a truth I hadn't spoken aloud. Part of me wants to believe her. Part of me wants this to be real. Dr. Winters leaned forward. Wanting doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. The question is not whether she has changed. It's whether you want her in your life changed or not. Her words sat heavy in me for days. Because Evelyn's unraveling wasn't just hers. It was mine, too. For the first time, I wasn't the beautiful daughter clawing for scraps of approval. I was a woman standing at a crossroads, free to choose. Did I want to look back or finally fully forward? When I drove west, I had no clear destination, only the instinct to put as many miles as possible between myself and the life I had abandoned. Boston's brick buildings and clipped accents faded in my rearview mirror, replaced by rolling farmland, endless highways, and finally mountains rising like sentinels against the sky. 2 weeks later, I stopped in Seattle. It was as far as I could get without leaving the country, and it felt right. The Pacific Northwest air smelled of salt and pine, thick with mist, that softened the edges of everything. Rain fell often, as though the sky itself was practicing grief. I matched it quietly, crying in coffee shops on hiking trails in the solitude of my new apartment. That apartment was modest, just 2 rooms on Queen Anne Hill, with a view of Puget Sound. The first time I stood by the window, rain streaking the glass, I realized I had chosen everything in it for myself. No grand dining room, no art to impress. Just soft furniture in ocean tones, shelves lined with books I loved. A kitchen stocked with food I actually wanted to eat. For the first time, I built a home that reflected me. Work came quickly. With my experience and credentials, I found a position at a boutique financial firm specializing in ethical investments. The culture was nothing like Boston's high-stakes competition. Here, they cared about values as much as returns. We want advisors who see clients as people, not portfolios, the managing partner told me in my interview. I nearly cried at the simplicity of it. For years, I had poured my expertise into building wealth for others, while secretly siphoning my own earnings into my mother's bottomless demands. Now every hour of my work benefited me and clients who genuinely valued my guidance. It was as if I'd stepped into an alternate universe where integrity wasn't weakness, but strength. Still, work couldn't fill the silence of my evenings. In Boston, even in my loneliness, my life had been crowded. Visits to my mother, phone calls, emergencies to manage. In Seattle, nights stretched wide and empty. I tried filling them with books, with long walks, with Netflix marathons. But grief has a way of sneaking into quiet spaces. The first Thanksgiving alone, I lay in bed clutching an old photo of my father, sobbing until dawn. On Christmas morning, I dreamed I was frantically shopping for my mother, only to wake up sweating, heart-pounding, realizing I no longer knew what she liked. My therapist in Seattle, Dr. Matthews, became my anchor. Unlike my Boston therapist, who had always encouraged reconciliation, Dr. Matthews told me something radical. Estrangement is sometimes the healthiest choice. Not every relationship can or should be saved. Her words cracked something open in me. For so long, I had seen leaving as failure, abandonment, betrayal. Now I began to consider it as survival. In one session, she asked me to write a letter to my younger self, the little girl desperate for approval. I sat at my desk, pen trembling, and wrote, "Dear little Peggy, it was never your job to make Mom happy. Her unhappiness was hers long before you were born. You didn't cause it, and you could never fix it. You were already enough exactly as you were." Reading it aloud in therapy, I broke down sobbing so hard my chest heaved. For the first time, I began to believe it. Healing, though, is never linear. Some days I walked through Pike Place Market, breathing in the scent of coffee and flowers, feeling alive in ways I hadn't for years. Other days I felt hollow, staring at strangers, laughing in restaurants, wondering if I had doomed myself to loneliness by cutting the cord that bound me to family. Then came Daniel. It was New Year's Eve when I met him at a small gathering hosted by my new friend Stephanie. He was a high school English teacher with kind eyes and a quiet, steady humor. We spent hours talking about books, hiking trails, and our favorite places in Seattle. When he asked for my number, my old fears surged. My mother's sabotage still echoed inside me, whispering that men left, that I wasn't enough. But something in me shifted. Saying yes to him felt like a small act of rebellion, so I gave it to him. Our first dates were simple walks around Green Lake Coffee at tucked-away cafes, browsing used bookstores. No pressure, no performance. For once, I wasn't thinking. What would my mother say about him? He wasn't a test. He was a choice. Slowly, I let my guard down. Meeting his family was like stepping into another world. They were imperfect, yes, but they argued with affection, disagreed without cruelty, showed interest without control. When his mother hugged me goodbye the first time, I froze stiff with shock before awkwardly returning the embrace. "They're normal," I told Daniel afterward, half in awe. He laughed. "Normal, yes. A little boring, maybe." Not boring, I corrected. Safe. 6 months into my new life, I had my first major breakthrough. I realized I could love without fear, not because I trusted Daniel completely, but because I was beginning to trust myself. I could survive loss. I could survive rejection. I already had. Meanwhile, letters from my mother trickled through Eleanor and my therapist. Her handwriting grew shakier, her words less defensive. She wrote of her support group of therapy of learning to live on her pension alone. She didn't demand my return. She only described her efforts as if to say, I'm trying. I didn't respond, not yet. I wasn't ready. But each letter was a seed buried in the soil of my heart, waiting. And so in Seattle, I grew. I hiked trails where waterfalls thundered into mist, learning to let nature drown out old voices. I planted herbs on my windowsill. Their green shoots a reminder that small things thrive with care. I made friends who knew nothing of Evelyn Hamilton, who liked me for who I was, not what I provided. For the first time in 35 years, I wasn't running toward approval or away from criticism. I was simply living. And though guilt still whispered, though loneliness still pressed against me in the quiet hours, I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could build a life not defined by the mother who had raised me, but by the woman I was finally becoming. A year after the night that shattered me, I returned to Boston. Not to stay, not to rescue, but to see. Curiosity mixed with dread guided me onto that plane as though I needed to witness with my own eyes what absence had done to my mother and what it had done to me. I didn't tell her I was coming. I booked a modest hotel downtown, walked streets that once defined my everyday. Boston felt both familiar and foreign, like a childhood home seen after decades away. The public garden still bloomed, but the bench where I once ate lunch between client meetings seemed smaller, almost insignificant. My old condo had a new family inside, their laughter spilling from open windows. It no longer belonged to me. On my second day, I visited Eleanor. At 81, she was still sharp as glass, pouring tea with steady hands. Your mother has changed, she told me, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Not completely. She still has her pride. But there's humility in her, now I never thought I'd see. I asked the question that had haunted me since her first shaky letter. Do you think I should see her? Eleanor leaned back, studying me. Only you can decide. But the woman who told you to leave her life is not quite the same woman who lives in that apartment now. I hadn't planned to see her that day, but as I left Eleanor's building, my feet carried me toward Brooklyn automatically. My mother's new address was a plain senior apartment complex, beige walls, and trimmed hedges. Nothing like the colonial she had clung to for decades. I parked across the street, intending only to look, to satisfy curiosity, but fate had other plans. At the coffee shop beside the complex, I stood in line trying to calm my racing heart with the promise of caffeine. Then I heard it, a voice I knew too well, though softer than I remembered. I turned. She was there, my mother. Her hair was still silver but looser, less lacquered into perfection. Her shoulders hunched slightly as though the weight of years had finally settled. She didn't see me at first, not until the barista called out my name for the order. Her eyes widened. Peggy. For a moment we were frozen. The bustle of the cafe swirled around us, oblivious. My throat tightened. Hello, Mom. We sat at a small table by the window, two strangers sharing history. I didn't know you were in Boston, she said finally. I didn't tell anyone except Eleanor. She nodded, her gaze darting over me as though cataloging the changes. You look, well, different, but well. So do you. And it was true. There was a softness in her, faint but undeniable. We made small talk about the weather, about the coffee words that felt absurd after decades of wounds. Then I suggested we walk across the street to the park. Neutral ground. On a wooden bench beneath budding trees, silence stretched between us. Then she did something I had never seen. She cried. Not performative tears, not manipulative ones. Quiet, dignified tears that slipped down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she said, voice steady despite the tremor. I never thought I'd see you again. I never planned to come back, I admitted. She nodded. I understand why. Her hands twisted in her lap. I've been going to a group. PAC, Parents of Adult Children. At first I went to learn how to get you back. But what I learned instead was why you left. I stayed silent, hardly believing what I was hearing. My therapist helped me see something I never wanted to face. She took a shaky breath. I treated you the way my mother treated me. She was cruel, Peggy. Nothing I did was good enough. She compared me to cousins, to neighbors, told me I was her greatest disappointment. I swore I'd be different, but I didn't know how. I had no model for love, so I repeated the only script I knew. Her confession chilled me. I had grown up with stories of my grandmother as saintly. Now I saw the chain of pain stretching back another generation. That explains some things I said carefully, but it doesn't excuse them. No, she agreed quickly. It doesn't. Nothing excuses the way I treated you, especially after your father died. I was jealous of your bond with him. He loved you in a way I didn't know how to love anyone. When he was gone, I blamed you because I couldn't bear to blame myself. Her words landed like stones in water, rippling through memories I had carried like scars. For once, she wasn't deflecting. She wasn't minimizing. She was admitting. She reached into her purse and pulled out a worn leather journal. I've been writing. My therapist suggested it. Everything my childhood, my marriage, my failures as your mother. If you ever want to understand, it's here. She placed it in my hands. You don't have to read it, but it's yours. I stared at the journal, its weight both heavy and fragile. Thank you. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said. I'm not even asking to be part of your life again. I just want you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, and I am sorry. We parted without promises, without the fantasy of reconciliation, but we parted with truth, and that was more than I had ever hoped for. Back in Seattle, I shared the journal with Dr. Matthews before daring to read it. Its pages held pain I hadn't imagined, and insights that reframed our history. It didn't erase the damage, but it explained the shape of it. 2 years after my disappearance, my life was unrecognizable. I was made partner at the firm specializing in helping women achieve financial independence after divorce or widowhood. Daniel had proposed on a mountain trail, his quiet steadiness anchoring me in ways I once thought impossible. And my mother, she continued her therapy, her support group, her quiet life in that senior apartment. Our contact remained cautious. Emails at first, then occasional phone calls. Eventually, she visited Seattle. She met Daniel. She even complimented his niece's crayon drawing without a single critique. We would never have the bond I once craved. That wound was too deep, too old. But we had something else: honesty, respect, a fragile truce between two flawed adults who had finally seen each other clearly. At her next birthday, she raised her glass in a modest restaurant near her apartment. Her voice trembled, but her words were steady. To second chances, she said. And to the daughter who was brave enough to leave so that both of us could become better versions of ourselves. I lifted my glass, my chest tight with something I couldn't quite name. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give isn't presence, it's absence. The courage to vanish until others see your worth. And sometimes, just sometimes, distance can plant the seeds of change that years of closeness never could.